experiences are very valid in all this. I want to look at avoidance from a slightly different lens, and this connects a little bit to some of the stammering research that was done many years ago. That is still, these concepts are quite alive and well still. This idea of a role conflict. So Joseph Sheehan, who was who was one of the people who came up with the stammering iceberg, और अगलाने को अप्रोच अवॉइडेंस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट के लेंस से देखने के लिए उन्होंने रोल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट के बारे में बहुत लिखा था। और रोल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ये है कि he basically talked about stammering as a problem of presentation of the self, कि we are constantly in a role conflict। हमारा रोल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ये है कि हमारी innate biological identity जो है, मेरी जो बेसिक बायोलॉजिकल एंटिटी है कि we are people who stammer. Now, it doesn't mean we stammer all the time. It doesn't mean that we stammer in every situation. लेकिन we have a proclivity to block. We have a propensity to block. हमारी tendency है block करने की. So that is our innate biological identity. We cannot get away from it. Of course, stammering is variable. Sometimes we block less, but basically we don't produce speech in a reliable way. There are biological limitations here. The other, because stammering is variable and we do experience spontaneous fluency many, many times, is the other role that we take on is our aspirational role, which is what is our desired social identity. So in order to preserve a desired social identity, which is that of a person who is fluent, who can present himself as very fluent, we're in this constant conflict between our biological identities and our desired social identities. And conflict में क्या होता है, role conflict में क्या होता है कि when we are confronted with this conflict, when we pass as fluent, and it doesn't work. There are many times it doesn't work, right? जितना भी आपको अवॉइड करना है, अपने नाम पे अवॉइड नहीं कर सकते। अगर आप अनलेस यू वांट टू लाई, अनलेस आपने अगर झूठा नाम अगर देना है तो और बात है, लेकिन अगर सही नाम अगर आपको देना है तो नाम पे अवॉइड नहीं कर सकते। कभी ना कभी तो हकलाहट निकलेगी। तो जब हकलाहट फिर निकलती है, देन वी फील शेम, because there is now this conflict between an innate biological identity and a socially desired identity. It's an identity conflict, which is why he talked about it as a problem of the presentation of the self. And so to give you an example, when we do not avoid, when we go straight into the stammer and we stammer with full eye contact, with a smile, when we stammer with a full eye contact and a smile, what is happening is we are now syncing our biological identity with our social identity as well, because we're not really concerned that much about our stammering. So this is what acceptance will do, right? If you accept yourself as a person who stammers and can present yourself as a person who stammers, you resolve the conflict. जब हम लोगों को बताते हैं कि हम हकलाते हैं, जब हम self disclosure में जाते हैं, when we tell people that we are stammer, that we are people who stammer, we resolve this role conflict. When we voluntarily stammer, we resolve the role conflict. When we do not avoid, we resolve this role conflict. So the ways to resolve this role conflict that he had talked about many years ago is through approach, not through avoidance. And any therapy that you see, any successful management of stammering that you read about, चाहे वो successful management speech therapy से आ रही है, चाहे self help group से आ रही है, चाहे community में join करने में आ रही है, जो भी successful management है, it all goes through approach behavior. It all goes through approach behavior. Approach is the opposite of avoidance. So I want to just let this idea sink in कि basically at a higher level जो हो रहा है कि we are confronted with this conflict between these two roles that we are taking on. And so Obviously, as everybody has said here, avoidance के short term gain है. We are able to escape the situation. We are able to flee from the situation. We can pass off as fluent. We avoid social embarrassment. We avoid negative consequences. ये सब कुछ जो है, this is very obvious. So it's a safety behavior. Basically, it is a safety behavior. Lekin safety behaviors are not necessarily healthy behaviors. So safety behaviors are also limiting behaviors. So there are many ways in which avoidance limits us. I think understanding that is obviously very useful. As everybody has said here, we're losing opportunities to communicate. Also, क्या हो रहा है कि we are expending a lot of time, headspace. A lot of headspace is going into investing in avoidance behavior. If I'm going to avoid a particular situation, if I'm preparing to avoid a particular situation, I'll have to think about कि क्या बात होगी, क्या शब्द आएगा, किसके साथ बात. All this talk is very overwhelming. All this internal dialogue is actually very, very overwhelming, and it's leaving us very little time and space for actual social connection because we are so involved in self-focused attention in this particular task that it's leaving us not very available for the social acceptance. The other thing is it is barrier to acceptance. Avoidance is a massive barrier to acceptance because if I keep avoiding, I'll never learn how to deal with the situation. And so it's not preparing me to deal with the real situation when it's happening. It's also a barrier to self advocacy. अगर हमें अपने आप वकालत करनी है अपने लिए अगर अगर हमको अपने आप वकालत करनी है तो हम लोगों को बताना होगा कि हम लोग हकलाते हैं. So it is against social advocacy. It is against social acceptance, and to a great extent, it is against personal growth. That's part of the thing. The other thing is, it is very habit forming. Avoidance behavior is very habit forming, and avoidance behavior runs the gamut. It runs a very vast range. तो अवॉइडेंस बिहेवियर ये हो सकता है कि हम शब्द चेंज कर रहे हैं, किसी के साथ बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, वी वांट टू टॉक. अगर हम क्लासरूम में हैं, स्कूल में हैं, कॉलेज में हैं, कोई सवाल हमें है पूछना है तो हम सवाल हाथ नहीं उठाएंगे. अब अगर हम हाथ नहीं उठाएंगे, सवाल नहीं पूछेंगे तो हम जानेंगे क्या? हाउ विल वी लर्न? हमारा हमारा सवाल जो है वो कैसे आंसर होगा, राइट? And that will show up in our academic preparation and what we know and all this stuff. So it has some real consequences, but also the habit forming component is very, very important. Because one of the first things that we learn, that our bodies learn as people who stammer, one of the first things, avoidance behavior that our bodies learn is avoiding eye contact. That's the biggest one. That is the biggest one. That is the biggest obvious flight. The biggest instance of flight in a stammering moment is looking away. अगर हम किसी के साथ आंख नहीं मिलाएंगे तो मैं आपको दिखाता हूं कि क्या लगता है कि जब मैं आंख मिला के हकलाता हूं और आंख हटा के हकलाता हूं. मेरा नाम अमित बजाज है. मेरा नाम अमित बजाज है. एक एक इंस्टेंस में मैंने आंखें हटा ली, एक इंस्टेंस में आंखें मिला ली. किस सिचुएशन में आपको लगा कि मैं ज्यादा कॉन्फिडेंट स्पीकर हूं? फर्स्ट स्पीकर में, फर्स्ट सिचुएशन में या सेकंड सिचुएशन में? या तो आंखें मिला के हकलाना ये स्किल है जो हम सीख सकते हैं. और दिस इज गोइंग टू टेक केयर ऑफ अ लॉट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम्स, इंटरनल प्रॉब्लम्स। एक तो क्या होगा कि जब आप आंखें मिला के हकलाएंगे किसी के साथ, अवॉइड नहीं करेंगे, आई कांटेक्ट अवॉइड नहीं करेंगे, तो क्या होगा कि आप सिग्नल देंगे लिसनर को कि आंखें मिलाओ मेरे साथ। क्या होता है कि कॉन्वर्सेशन में, पर्टिकुलरली किसी कोई नए आदमी के साथ, नए व्यक्ति के साथ बात करने के लिए क्या होता है कि वो हमसे जो है सिग्नल ले रहे हैं। लोगों को क्या मालूम है कि लोग जैसे कि कैसे बात करनी चाहिए किसी के साथ जो हकलाता है। लोगों को इसका आइडिया नहीं है। इसलिए अगर हम आंखें नहीं मिलाएंगे तो वो भी आंखें नहीं मिलाएंगे, क्योंकि उनका रिस्पॉन्स ये होगा कि ये आदमी जो है ये चाहता है कि मैं आंखें नहीं मिलाऊं, इसलिए वो आंखें मुझसे नहीं मिला रहा है। So the signal that we are sending to the listener is that let's all avoid eye contact because this is an awkward, embarrassing moment. But you do the opposite. जब आप स्ट्रेट अवे किसी की आंख में देख के आप और आंख ह ह ह ह ह ह ह हकलाते हो, चाहे आप वॉलंटरी स्टैमरिंग कर रहे हो, चाहे आप नहीं कर रहे हो, अगर आप किसी के going straight into the stammer and maintaining eye contact with somebody is actually a much more confident and a much more normalized way to have an interaction with somebody. So avoiding eye contact is the one of the first things our bodies learn, and it stays with us for a very long time. So one of the one of the big things that is actually taught quite often in speech therapy is to maintain eye contact when you stammer for a very good reason. It normalizes the conversational exchange. It allows you to advocate for yourself. It sends the right message to the listener. And in the process of doing that, you experience less shame. You experience less anxiety. You experience less guilt. So, one of the things I would love for people in this room to try next week is कि चाहे आप जैसे कि डॉक्टर अजय वॉलंटरी स्टैमरिंग करते हैं, उनको ठीक लगता है वॉलंटरी स्टैमरिंग, गुड। तो अगली बार जब भी आप वॉलंटरी स्टैमरिंग कीजिए किसी के साथ, आई कांटेक्ट के साथ कीजिए। क्योंकि अगर आपकी वो जो वॉलंटरी स्टैमरिंग, अगर जो नकली स्टैमरिंग है असली भी हो जाएगी, तब भी आप आई कांटेक्ट मेंटेन करके कीजिए। So find one instance in your everybody here in the room, if you want to take up this challenge, एक इंस्टेंस ढूंढिए अगले हफ्ते, कम से कम एक इंस्टेंस ढूंढिए जिसमें आप आई कांटेक्ट के साथ हकलाएंगे। दैट इज द वंस यू डू दैट, और अगर उसका वीडियो बना सकते हैं, इवन बेटर, क्योंकि दिस इज अ दिस इज अ टेक्नोलॉजी दैट इज वेरी कॉमन कॉल्ड वीडियो सेल्फ मॉडलिंग। वीडियो सेल्फ मॉडलिंग में क्या होता है कि आप अपने वीडियो बनाएंगे, जो सही वीडियो है, जो आपको अच्छा लगेगा, जो कि विच हैज द पर्टिकुलर टारगेट बिहेवियर दैट यू आर लुकिंग फॉर, जो भी आपका गोल है उस टाइप का अगर आप वीडियो बनाएंगे, तो नेक्स्ट टाइम अगर आप नई सिचुएशन में जाएंगे तो वीडियो देख के जाइए। तो इट्स काइंड ऑफ लाइक स्पोर्ट्समैन क्या करते हैं, जो लोग स्पोर्ट्स खेलते हैं, स्पोर्ट्समैन जो है वो अपने अपने जो जैसे कोई कोई क्रिकेट खेल रहा है या बास्केटबॉल खेल रहा है, वो अपना जो मूव जो है, जो मूवमेंट जो है, वो बार बार देखते हैं, बार बार देखते हैं कि इसको मैं कैसे फाइन ट्यून कर सकता हूँ। और जो फाइनल जो जो मूवमेंट है, जो कि किसी ने क्रिकेट गेम में ठीक से बैट किया या बास्केटबॉल खेल 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 रहे हैं, तो अगर ठीक से किया तो वो देखना बिफोर यू गो टू द नेक्स्ट गेम। That is the power of video modeling, that you can actually watch the target behavior that you're working on before you get to the next game. So, agar mapping this into what we are talking about here, if we are able to create video self models of ourselves, talking with full eye contact, stammering with full eye contact, then we can use that video to give ourselves a model for how to do it next time and the next time and the next time in a different situation. So that's all. I'll stop here and see if anybody has any comments or questions.
So, any questions from anybody? रोल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट आप लोग
Yes,
समझ गए
sir.
ना?
I have a question regarding to eye
हाँ
contact.
हाँ
Say,
बोलिए.
naturally, this is hard for like to do eye contact with someone if you have like facing any problem while talking. For me, it is so hard. I try to do lot of time in past, but I fail always whenever I try to eye contact and instead at the same time. So
Hmm.
like what I do, I just do practice more and more. There's any like trick or anything which can help
हाँ,
me.
तो इसके लिए अभिषेक प्रैक्टिस जो है आपको करनी चाहिए, सोशल प्रैक्टिस करनी चाहिए। ट्रिक इसका यही है कि डोंट चैलेंज योरसेल्फ टू मेंटेन आई कांटेक्ट विद समबडी व्हेन इट इज डिफिकल्ट। फाइंड अ कम्युनिकेशन पार्टनर that you're
Okay,
comfortable with.
okay,
Start low, start easy.
okay,
And that is the point. अगर आपको मार्केट में जाने मार्केट में जाके सब्जी वाले के साथ बात करने से आई कांटेक्ट बनाना ठीक नहीं लगता, तो डोंट स्टार्ट देयर।
okay,
स्टार्ट विद
sir.
अ TISA member, right? Start with a TISA member. Begin there. That's what a peer-to-peer learning situation will provide. Lots of communication opportunities in a very supportive context. So start there. Start with somebody in your family. Start with a close friend. It'll feel differently if you stammer with eye contact with somebody who also stammers. That's going to be easier, maybe easier, but it's also important to talk to somebody with eye contact who is not a person who stammers. So start with a communication partner that is very easy, who already knows that you stammer, you are feeling very comfortable with them. And the other trick is don't do it all day.
Okay,
Don't do it all day. Do it maybe twice a day. Think of it as a dose of behavior, small dose of behavior that you're giving yourself twice a day, and work up to the challenge. Don't start at a higher level, start at a lower level, and keep it short. Keep it short, keep a short exchange. And if you can do this, this is actually even more powerful. One more trick, one more tip. Tell the person that you're talking to that when I stammer, I will maintain eye contact with you, and please maintain eye contact with me.
okay, sir. Got it.
Because if you do that, अगर आप अपने आप if you do that, तो आप अपने आप के लिए वकालत कैसे करते हैं वो सीख रहे हैं. Because then you can take that piece of advocacy into a different situation. You'll feel more comfortable talking about it in a different situation. Same thing with bouncing, same thing with any technique that you're using to reduce struggle in your speech. If you can tell the person that you are going to be using a technique, that is a very powerful message, because you're telling your body, you're giving your body permission to use the technique. क्या हो रहा है कि ये techniques जो हैं ये novel behavior है. This is all new stuff, and speech is so automatic. It is such muscle memory. It is such an automatic behavior that it is very difficult to have the presence of mind when you're using speech to make meaning to focus on movement, right? You're taking away from the automaticity of the behavior. And that's very difficult when you're using the same behavior to make meaning. There's this conflict between movement and meaning. So if you are able to tell somebody that you're going to use a technique, मैं बाउंसिंग ऐसे करूंगा आपके साथ, मैं ये टेक्निक सीख रहा हूँ, तो मैं आई आई कांटेक्ट के साथ आपके साथ थोड़ा सा बाउंसिंग फ्रीक्वेंटली प्रैक्टिस करना चाहता हूँ. प्लीज मेंटेन आई कांटेक्ट विद मी. बस you're going to
Got
feel
it.
very differently about it, and keep doing it. Keep doing it. एक हफ्ते, 2 हफ्ते, twice a day, thrice a day. ऑटोमेटिकली क्या होगा कि एक्सपोजर के साथ जो है आपकी जो है एंजाइटी कम हो जाएगी, स्किल्स ज्यादा डेवलपमेंट हो जाएगी, एंड देन यू कैन टेक इट टू द नेक्स्ट लेवल एंड से लेट मी ट्राई इट इन अ सिचुएशन व्हेन आई फील अ लिटिल बिट मोर डिफिकल्ट, or let me try it with the same person, but let me try to talk for a longer period of time. You can manipulate these variables quite easily. But start low, start small, but do it frequently.
Okay, sir. I will try. Thanks so much.
Any other question or comment or feedback before we wind up?
I just wanted to ask one thing. If the person who's hearing us, like the person to whom we are talking, if that person is showing some kind of uncomfortable feeling when we stammer, that time for us, it might be hard to have eye contact because we can understand like they don't have the patience to listen to us. So I was just thinking in that way, like what can do about it? You are muted, Amit, sir.
Sorry. That's a very good question. It's like, I mean, obviously that is a higher demand. It is a much more demanding situation. One of the things you can do in that situation is to lead with self-disclosure, right? What self-disclosure does is it clarifies expectations.
Mm.
The same person, like if you didn't know that I'm a person who stammers and you are not a person who stammers, if I, so there's a couple of hacks you can try here. One is this idea about leading with self-disclosure, because in a self-disclosure, when you do it, you can also ask for what you want. So in my self-disclosure script, I have a very standard self-disclosure script. I keep changing it, keep tweaking it to the particular environment I'm in. But basically, one of my lines in my self-disclosure script is, what will help us is if you give me some time and keep some eye contact. Now, I use those words very carefully. Give me something and keep something, right? So give me some time, keep some eye contact so I can move through my stammers with some ease. I'm used to saying this very, very commonly. Now, that is clarifying expectations, and it's using the opportunity of self-disclosure to ask for what you want from the speaker. Another way to advocate for yourself, right? This is all part of advocacy. If you link self-disclosure to advocacy, if you linked voluntary stammering to advocacy, you find purpose in what you're doing. So an advocacy is a much bigger value, much bigger value. So if you link a behavior to a higher value, you increase the motivation for that behavior. You become more clear about it. So that's one thing. Lead with the self-disclosure. Secondly, if you're feeling comfortable with voluntary stammering, do it with that person in a very light way. If you are feeling comfortable, just throw some voluntary repetitions in your speech. Maintain eye contact with them. Preface it with a self-disclosure statement. You're doing voluntary stammering because you feel comfortable enough doing it, and you're leading with the self-disclosure, you're maximizing your chances that this person is going to change their behavior a little bit towards you. And if you think about the larger concept of advocacy, now what you've done is you've advocated for the community. This person, when they talk to the next person who stammers, will know that that is what is required when you're talking to somebody who stammers. So there are many ways of navigating this.
Thank you so much, Amit. Sir.
I just wanted to add one thing. If it is a playful situation and if you can pull it off, you can even, as Dr. Amit said, you can do a little voluntary stammering and also smile. And if he still looks surprised, you can say, I'm only stammering. I have not pulled out a gun. I mean, if it is if it's a suitable situation, you can simply say, look, I'm only stammering, as if you are saying, I'm only stammering. I'm not doing anything socially objectionable that you are making a face. And if you say it with a laugh and a smile, chances are that person also will start smiling and probably will get an understanding that he was behaving in a very unreasonable fashion by showing his surprise or discomfort. Why should anybody be uncomfortable with somebody stammering?
Yeah.
If you pull out a gun, if you pull out a
humor is a
gun,
very
huh?
humor is a very, very is a beautiful device to humor is a beautiful device to keep things light.
Yes.
And the more you keep things light, the more you are a little bit self-deprecating about yourself,
Mm.
a little bit, just in a humorous kind of a way, the more you accept yourself, the more your anxiety gets reduced, all of those things. Yeah.
In this context, I just want to, share one thing. You can you can go to YouTube and search Nina G's videos. She's a stand-up comedian and she's a stammerer, and she has many such one-liners. When she goes on stage as a stand-up comedian, of course she's stammering, and then she uses one of these one-liners. I'm only stammering. I'm not undressing in public. So what are you gawking at? She'll say something outrageous or something funny like this. And then audience becomes very serious. So we can learn a lot from these stand-up comedians, how to deal with social discomfort or socially embarrassing situations. But it takes some practice and and some confidence in yourself to pull it off. And one last thing I want to add, just one thing. Many of us in Asia, perhaps it's a cultural thing that we don't look into people's eyes, especially when you're talking to your dad. For that, there is a technique. We have actually used it in our workshops. Take a pen and paper or a diary, go to bus stand, don't talk to people, just look at them carefully. And when you pass them, then stop and make a note of the color of his eyes. Was it black? Was it brown? Was it cat-like eyes? Or did he have, snake-like eyes? Describe one line. Then, and then keep on walking. Meet the next person, look carefully into their eyes. You don't have to talk to them. Sometimes we meet people in the street and we just smile and carry on. So same way, just smile, make eye contact, look at them, carry on, and then stop and again write down. When you've written down 5 such names, stop the exercise, have a chai samosa, go home. Do it again for 3, 4 days, and within a
Yeah.
week or 10 days, it will become your habit to look into
Yeah.
people's eyes and note, make a
Yeah.
note of what you are seeing. That you can try.
So this point gets talked about quite a bit when we are talking about the social context of stammering, that different cultures have different emphasis on eye contact. Obviously, in India, I'm also very well aware of it, being from there, that talking to a person of authority, people tend to avoid eye contact because it's seen as a sign of respect. So when I bring up this point quite often in my graduate course, my students ask me, like, what about cultural sensitivity to eye contact? How can you force somebody to make the eye contact with you? And my response always is the same, that this is not about social context. If you're not, if your culture or if any culture finds it acceptable to not make eye contact with somebody, then don't make eye contact with somebody. But avoiding eye contact during a moment of stammering is avoidance behavior. It's not social cultural. So even if you do not make eye contact with somebody regularly, try to make eye contact with them when you stammer. Because then you're really you're preserving the cultural norm if that's what you want to do, but you're also managing your avoidance behavior at the same time, because avoiding eye contact during an MOS, during a moment of stammering, is actually avoidance behavior. It's not social context as much. So yeah, so you can have both, right? You can act in socially appropriate ways, but also manage your stammering at the same time, recognizing that where does evasion or eye contact fit? It doesn't fit into the social context as much as it fits into the avoidance, profile.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a child, I'll just share one little thing. When I was a child, uh, as Dr. Amit said, that avoiding eye contact is moving of the eyes is the first avoidance. My whole upper body used to, go to one side. So as if I was, avoiding something physically. I'm avoiding someone physically. So that is very true that avoidance manifests in our body in these ways: shifting of eyes, turning of head, or head bending down. And once we understand these things, we can change them, God willing.
So that is, I want to just connect this little point of what Dr. Sachin said to something we were talking about last week, the difference between avoidance behavior and secondary behavior, right? So yes, there is a difference between those two, but there's a lot of overlap.
Yes.
All that he is saying, turning the body, looking away, every time you do that, this becomes part of the motor pattern. So the avoidances become part of the motor pattern, and connecting it to my earlier point about being habit forming. क्या हो गया कि initially when you were little, when you were a child, when we were children, we learned कि अगर मैं थोड़ा आंखें झपका लूं तो शब्द निकल आएगा. So then the body went to that next time क्योंकि it was successful. So now we blink eyes every time we talk. Now that's not enough because the body gets used to it. Then we move our heads. We blink our eyes and move our heads. That's not enough. Then we move our eyes, we blink our heads, we stamp our feet. That's not enough. So this is all avoiding the moment. A lot of it is and this becomes this becomes integrated into the conditioned motor pattern. So part of what so it's fine to think about avoidance being very broad, secondary behavior being very specific about the motor pattern, but avoidances are very much become part of the composite motor pattern because postural changes, eye contact, head nods, all of this stuff gets integrated as the way that you individually stammer. That's why understanding this behavior, ये समझना कि मैं कैसे हकलाता हूँ, ये बहुत ही important चीज है क्योंकि then you're becoming aware of reflexive behavior. And a lot of it is about becoming, a lot of stammering management is about becoming reflective about things that we are reflexive about. Right? So that is what Dr. Srivastava is saying at the beginning of this conversation, that when you bring the light of consciousness onto an automatic, when you shine the light of consciousness into an automatic behavior, a different way of saying the same thing is you become reflective about something that you're reflexive about. And that opens up a whole lot of avenues about how you want to move through it in a different way. It's been an hour and 45. I think we should probably close if you're okay with that.
I think we should wind up now. Whatever questions you may still have, you can share in Telegram group as a audio or as a text, and we'll try to answer all those questions. And keep on making videos and keep on sharing your call records.